indigenous like medicine, I guess plant medicine, it's what it is more than anything else, it's a process of inquiry, which always is a process of coming into relation and dialogue with sentient human and non-human.
Hello, and welcome to Sacred Herbalism, the full moon segment of the Elder Tree podcast, where we explore how plants can support us to enter into a sacred relationship with life and the living world. I'm Stephanie Hazel, and I've recorded this episode beneath the gaze of epic Wollumbin, where I live in Bundjalung country, and I pay my respects to the First Nations people of this land, as well as to the spirits and plants of this ancient earth. If you love what we do, you can support the Elder Tree mission of putting medicine in the hands of the people by joining our Patreon, where you can access special teachings from our presenters and our interviewees. So, let's walk into the moonlit forest together. Are you ready? This month, I'm honoured to welcome Tyson Yungaporta to the Elder Tree podcast. Tyson is a senior research fellow and lecturer in Indigenous Wisdom at Deakin University here in Melbourne. He is the author of the incredible book Sand Talk: How Indigenous Wisdom Can Save the World. If you haven't read this yet, then you really must read it. As an Australian, if you are Australian, then I think that this explanation of how Indigenous wisdom and knowledge and ways of seeing the world can enrich our own culture and all humans is really important and actually quite mind-blowing. He talks a lot about how the human brain works spatially and relationally, which is why story, place, relationships and context are so important to our capacity to make sense of the world. And this does come up in our conversation about plants here as well. In Tyson's opinion, he says that plants, when they're communicating with us, they're really not that likely to tell us something about us as individuals, but they're much more likely to give us important information about this context, information about the season that we're in, and how to engage with our environment in an appropriate way. This interview was painfully spontaneous. I had been emailing Tyson for about 3 months. I think I emailed him 5 times without a response before receiving back just a one-liner saying, "I've got 2 hours now if you want to do that interview thing." So I jumped on Zoom in a panic and hit record. It's not how I usually do it, but it was an excellent yarn. Now, a little disclaimer. This conversation was recorded the day after the voice referendum, and Tyson was not happy with the outcome. So we do talk about this a bit, and I do hope you're able to roll with this, even if your opinions are different from any of the ones that are expressed here. The referendum is over, so let's put it behind us and move forwards together towards a future where Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians have great conversations and come together to create the best version of ourselves and our country that we can. Thank you so much, Tyson. It's such a pleasure and honour to be talking to you today.
No worries. And just have to acknowledge that I'm in a women's space here. I can't really say place because it's not really a place, is it?
No, it's not a place. It's a space.
Yeah, it's a women's yarning space here. So I'm acknowledging that I can only really be at the edges of that and probably facing outwards.
Yeah, thanks for that acknowledgement. And yeah, it is definitely, even in the mainstream Australian community, it's definitely a space and industry that's really dominated by women, and many women seem called towards that direction. Yeah. But welcome your thoughts and comments and ideas in that space as well. So something that we've been exploring on this podcast is the idea of having relationships with plants more than just as commodities that we can use to provide healing for ourselves and our bodies, and have a professional kind of relationship with plants. But what does it even mean to be in relationship with the plants that we use and work with and heal with? And what do you think the importance is of actually having relationships with non-human beings?
Well, it's there all the time anyway. It's just a matter of whether you notice it. It's whether you notice at this time that the white flowers come on the tea trees, and that means that you can buy lychees at the supermarket. These relations are all there. Yeah, they're always there. And I don't know, plants are sort of subtle things. They have that story that it sort of works in a different way from things that jump and hop and walk and run all around the place, crawl. Yeah, they're a bit different, eh?
They are.
Mm.
They're older. I think they're slower. I remember having this beautiful time camping in Davies Creek, just near Atherton, up in northern Queensland, on my own. And we're just walking along this creek for hours, and was there for a few days. And there's that thing that happens when you're on your own in nature. Well, for me anyway, eventually you start to kind of drop some of the human thinking. And I had this moment of looking at these kind of twisted type of gum, I don't know what they're called. And I had this like, oh, wow, they're actually dancing. Like if I was slow enough, if I could slow down enough, I would see the way that they're growing is a kind of exquisitely elongated dance, and just because I'm so fast as a human, they seem like they're still and not.
But then they do adapt to our cultures, our histories, and our times and places, and what's going on. Really good example in the south down here, and right up all the way up through New South Wales and into southern Queensland. You see that mistletoe. You come across mistletoe very much?
No.
Sometimes we call it snotty gobbles because it gets these little fruits on. These sort of slimy little fruits that you can eat, and kids love it, and we call them some snotty gobbles. It grows all over the place, and I don't know, it's a children's plant. And in some places, like especially out west in New South Wales, it used to be where the old fellas would sit down there underneath. It was the men that would do it, would sit underneath where the mistletoe is hanging down out of the tree. It's this kind of parasite plant, So it grows on a parent tree. And so spiritually, it's a child's plant. It's a children's plant. And the old fellas would sit underneath it to sing the spirit of the new baby in from the place in the land, to come into and inhabit after that quickening, inhabit that belly. And I tell you what, if anybody wants to use bits of Indigenous wisdom, to get behind bodily autonomy for women, you feel free to use that factoid.
And
There's some kind of Paleolithic precedent. I'm not down with people doing that, but I'd say if it's for women's bodily autonomy in the world, then fucking get it.
And that would be the European mistletoe that's become naturalized here, or is there an Indigenous version?
No. Yes, that traditional one. And the men stopped doing that. And what happened was after a while, a few decades, the plant started growing differently.
What was different?
Getting in some, it started growing like this big dick. Like this stick would come out. I'm not kidding. Long and I don't know, like a baby's arm holding an apple, I guess you might say. One of them kind ones. And so this sort of twist, this stick would sort of grow out, this gnarly sort of big voodoo and start growing out from these things. And that was just really interesting, because a lot of people will sort of go, well, that's some old people. Those old fellas are still there singing. That's how our children are still getting born through. And arguably settler babies too, because they've got to get their spirit from somewhere, but just don't fucking tell them that, because there's not very many of them who wouldn't get carried away with that and start using it to try and fucking claim their own place and basically extinguishing everyone else's title to the place before they've even figure out how to bloody share it. Sorry, I'm still feeling bitter from that fucking decision just come down, the referendum.
So you should.
Yeah, we should. Us and like the 40-odd% of decent people in Australia, we should just secede from the rest of it.
Yeah.
Other for big chunk. Go and stay in fucking Gilead or wherever they want to stay, and we'll get on with.
What I found really disappointing in the whole conversation around the voice, and I'll be proud that I voted 100% yes and advocated for that in my community. But I saw in my more alternative kind of, my Facebook thread, which is quite kind of an alternative and pro-human rights, I would say, collective, in the referendum around gay marriage, it was like everyone was like, vote yes, vote yes, vote yes, this really united front. And in the, the voice about giving the Indigenous people of Australia a place to be heard in the political machinations of our country, it was incredibly divided, and it was really disheartening for me. I thought, and if my social group is divided on that, there's no way it's getting through.
They're about to see, like they were saying, a yes vote's going to divide Australia, but they're about to see what actually going to divide it, and what divided fucking looks like, because there's a lot of us who just aren't coming back from this. Anyway, and we're not talking about it right now. It's important to situate ourselves where we are historically right now, because plants respond to these things. To stolen generations, that mistletoe responded culturally, entheogenically, and arguably biologically in the way it reacts and responds and grows and does its thing. It became something that people with stolen children in our communities would hang up in the window or at the door, of wherever we were staying. We'd hang that up and be working with that plant, to call the children home. If they could ever get away, that they would be called back and come back to there. So there's that idea that the spirit of that plant's looking out for the kids and always like holding some kind of attachment. It's doing that work for us of maintaining some kind of connection in spirit to these children who are gone and lost and forgetting. That would be the thing that leads them home one day. So we have that
with the mistletoe, the native mistletoe.
Yeah, we have that with the mistletoe, and we have it with many things that sort of change, even things, foreign things, weeds and things like that. Billy goat weed.
What do you do with billy goat weed?
That and talk to our billy goat weed, and we figure out that it's really good for bruises. Yeah. So Indigenous, like medicine, I guess, plant medicine. It's what it is more than anything else. It's a process of inquiry. Which always is a process of coming into relation and dialogue with, sentient human and non-human.
And that does require a phase shift for Western thinking. You have to move away from a mechanistic universe model to start to be like, oh, the universe is responsive and alive, and I'm not the only truly living being here. And that's a really big jump if you've grown up in our culture.
But let me just throw out something, it's challenging there too. Is that it's basically our method of inquiry. It doesn't countenance just little subjective flights of fancy and things like that. You might have a story for something, or you might experience something, but something like dicks growing out of mistletoes, and mistletoes being things that connect children, lost children, back to their homes. These things don't just arise out of nowhere because one person sees it and tells everybody. It's big, vast networks of knowledge and people inquiring and exchanging what they've seen in different data sets together over quite a big period of time and over quite a distance as well. You have these networks of like verification and falsification systems of knowledge and peer review processes, and these collective processes of knowledge. Nobody can sit there and go, oh, I am the mistletoe whisperer. It's like, no, you're fucking not, even if that's your totem, it doesn't make you special. So, it's in a lot of ways, Indigenous knowledge processes are really similar to science when science is working. When science is working, when it's not being co-opted for mad science or pseudoscience or bloody.
Or when it's science as a practice rather than science as a dogma.
Yeah, tinkering something that can be scaled and weaponized to kill everybody or to make a killing in one way or another, What I want to just jump back to what you were saying before around the flights of fancy. It's eerily echoing a conversation I had with a friend last night. And one of the things I've been working on is with groups of people, practicing meditating with plants and trying to open a kind of intuitive channel of conversation with the plant. And the tricky thing there is that as Henry Corbin says, the imaginal is very close to the imaginative, and being
I find in myself, the way I've been educated, I've had that capacity to listen to the subtle realms really stripped out of me throughout my life. And so it can be very confusing whether you're actually hearing something or feeling something or interpreting something in a real way, or whether you're just on a flight of fantasy. And I think there's a real risk in, especially the kind of alternative white Australian kind of looking for something more spiritual in their lives. And it's very easy for us to then like make a bunch of shit up in our desire to feel connected.
Here's how you know. Here's how you know if it's not true. If you have something specific, generalizable that's coming through as a message that you can share with others, many others, then it's probably bullshit, because that's not how plants talk.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
It's not the kind of knowledge you get. I mean, you don't. You just get very general, just gentle nudges towards where and how to go in your inquiry. If you're coming to country the right way and open and with the right intent, and as a node in that system, to use Western ideas, but if you're part of that system, if you're embedded in it, in country, then country will be open to you, and you'll be placed where you need to be placed. So your inquiry might be towards mistletoe, and that you can make a body wash out of it, but you're looking for more like, okay, so what what's the best season? You might be inquiring, to get these leaves and boil them to make the body wash that I then tip over myself. And just make sure you don't use your woman's towels when you dry yourself afterwards, because they fucking stain them, and then she's going to hate you forever for doing that. By the way, everybody, let me just put that out there. Mistletoe stains your woman's towels and she doesn't like it.
You're mainly talking to women here, so.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, if you want to change the color of your towels, mistletoe. But let's say you're trying to inquire about that as a dye or as something else, and you come alongside. Country might not want you there, Country might want you looking at something else. Country might want you looking at, where ants are taking certain saps from, what they're attracted to, where the bees are going at that time. Country might want you looking at something else that's not in your agenda, and sometimes it's showing you something else that's non-linear and off to the side that ends up being a signal, seasonally or something, or, something that helps make some other aspect of that plant bioavailable in that season at that particular time and place, and if you're not being that sentient entity embedded in the system, then you're not experiencing the communication properly, because it's not the plant just talking to you. Like, yes, that's doing its work like that, but it's doing it through country. Country's talking to you, and country is a big interrelated system of entities that forms, a quite singular consciousness.
It definitely highlights, and you're saying that I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely go out, if I go out into country, to use your term, and want to connect with a plant, I definitely have a very clear focus on a particular plant, and that to shift, to open up even more to just the spirit of the land there in a broader sense is something I'm not in the habit of doing. So that's a really nice invitation. Thank you.
That's it. And I mean, plants also are dangerous, They're not this static, thing with a chemical signature that's like constant, and this is what you find in mad science, not in proper science, but in mad science, like, what's used to scale things for sale, or patent things, or seize things, or weaponize things, etc., etc. And then they tend to go, well, this is a soapy leaf. So, if it's used for antifungal, if it's supposed to have antifungal properties, then that will be in the chemical signature of that plant. And then we can copy that and make a fucking compound. And that's just, But, I don't know. I did do a study once where we tried to, we were doing this with chemistry students, and so like second or third years or something. So we were getting them to do a chemical analysis of the chemical profile of two different samples of the same plant, and to look for those antifungal properties, and one of them was harvested in the right place, like on the country up north where it grows, in the right season when there's ringworm and you need that antifungal, so that, you know what I mean, in the right season to have that full effect.
Yeah, in a way, the plant's responding to the season.
And it was the part of the tree that you have to harvest from in order to get that and the full benefit. And then there was like one from the wrong time place, one from that was planted on the wrong country all the way down here in sort of shitty ground, and it wasn't it was completely ignoring what parts you get at what times and all that kind of thing. So you had to compare two samples, and they struggled with that. They struggled so much with the concept that there would be any difference just because of some cultural knowledge or some cultural idea of times and places. It's like, well, this is the same plant. It doesn't matter where it's grown. So they actually really what the big struggle with, and what made the results of that study just not replicable, not generalizable, not verifiable, not falsifiable, and just a mess, was their complete inability to remove that bias. What it is, it's knowing that there's a thing called time place, or a thing that you might call time place, and it's important that's communicating to you more than a sentient entity like a plant will. There's more contextual information coming through to you just in your relation with that plant in a particular time, in a particular place. And that's 99% of the communication you're going to have with that plant.
Context-based.
It's the contextual information.
Something I really love in your work, that the work of yours that I've seen, is the emphasis on context. And I think that's something that we in science, in that crazy way that it's been developing, it's all about taking everything out of context. And in herbal medicine, we see that so much, saying like, oh, the medicine of this plant is the berberine or is the saponin, trying to find those one chemical that's the real medicine, and strip that plant of all the context of its other chemicals. Normally that chemical comes in a much broader context of almost a symphony of other chemicals that are all working together.
Well, you look at your name, Hazel. All right, I got Frisian mates in Holland.
Yeah,
the Frisian Indigenous people, and they're always talking about the hazel, hazel. It's so important. You talk to anyone from Europe, and hazel's huge, like, as you know.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna mansplain an Indigenous plain hazel to you now.
Yeah, go on.
No, I'm not. I'm gonna get you to talk first, and then if there's and then I can draw out things that I might see in there too.
Yeah, well, I was born in Switzerland, in the Alps, in the mountains there, conceived way up in the French Swiss Alps, and
just down the road from Iceman.
Yeah, totally, just down the road from Iceman.
Nice.
Yeah. And my family have been in Switzerland for a very long time, and so my roots there are very much Swiss Celtic Druidic. And so the hazel, in the mythology of the Celtic peoples, it's the tree of life. It's in the world tree. It's in the center, and it has roots that grow in spirals. So there's a really rich symbolism with that. And the story that I know is that the hazel tree sits in the other world, and the hazelnuts drop into the pond of kind of, I guess, the fountain of life. And I imagine that I would translate that to how the Indigenous people talk about the dreaming, that other world, the place that's behind everything. And then the salmon eat the hazelnuts in that pool, and because the salmon are like the world bridges, they go between the fresh and the salt water, they carry that wisdom from the dreaming, from the other world, into our world of time and space.
And look, that you could see so much seasonal knowledge in that, in the lore that's coming through, with that sacred pond and those body of water and those salmon. There's so much seasonal, there's so much time, place stuff going on there. That's really beautiful. And but then you work your way out through the system, and you see how that aligns itself with that folk totemic trinity that you, of course, the Browns. So so what's that? It's the bear and the hare and the beaver, I think. I think it's the hare. It's definitely the bear and the beaver. but I wouldn't know some of my freaking culture, so I can't speak for it. But my Frisian mates are always talking to me about this, and they talk about what that folk totemic trinity like teaches them, around all that sort of stuff, and seasonally with the salmon and that salmon time, and how important it is that the bears are dragging the salmon up and leaving them, eating them in the forest, but then what they're bringing for the forest then too. The forest depends on that. And then the beavers, they fell. So they fell the hazel tree. Let's just look at the hazel trees. They fell the hazel tree at a certain height, which is the ideal height for coppicing the hazel trees. And so they fell that hazel tree in that season, and they fell it at exactly the right season for the things to be harvested for different, like the splines that they use to make baskets and backpacks and things like this.
The best walking sticks ever.
Exactly. But these things come at the right season. Yeah. So the stuff you need for your snowshoes comes at the right, you know what I mean? But they fell it just the right way in the right time and place to make all those things. And I keep seeing, I see all this and I go, this is our culture, same way we got it here. This is a fucking human thing. And it's not just a hazel tree talking to you, because if you're eating the hazelnut right season, even, and that includes the season that extends a little bit after that for, if you're storing them, maybe burying them in the mud and maybe they sprout, you know what I mean? Too, and you're having them in a different way then. But you eat them with the wild duck.
Yum.
And eating those things together. And they keep finding remains. They keep finding hazelnut shells and duck bones in the bottom of caves, in all over Europe. Because you eat those things together, man. The duck, the full medicinal qualities of the duck and the full medicinal qualities of the hazelnut and the optimal health, they're together. There's that alchemy that happens to make them optimally bioavailable, or whatever the words you say now for that.
Something that's
you do eat those things together. Yeah,
something I find entertaining is actually the last time I really dropped in with your work was I was listening to the interview with you and Joshua Schreier from on the Emerald, and I was walking in the mountains in Switzerland through all these hazel trees. And I was listening to you talking with Joshua Schreier and getting really excited about, I think it was the second interview you did with him. So it's interesting that we should be having this conversation about hazel trees together now.
Yeah. It's huge. But then, and this is so important for all Celtic peoples as well, which, those bastards went all, they spread their whole culture right across Europe, back in the day. It's really huge for them. The same sacred trees keep coming through, that oak, the hazel,
the birch.
Yeah, exactly. These things that you have, you have those rods and wands that you make from those things. You have the medicines that you use at different times.
Yeah.
That holly is at that time that helps you with colds. The hazel at that time, et cetera, et cetera. It's just most of the information you get from a plant, if you're talking to a plant, is going to be contextual information. Just the same as if you're an Aboriginal person, most of your communication with other Aboriginal people is contextual, and it's basically just your whole conversation is shorthand around shared contextual information, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, actually, you were talking about that in that podcast, all of the ways you can talk about what's happening using pseudo words because you share that contextual place, the place in time and space. It's interesting, as a Western herbalist, using all these plants that come from Europe predominantly, there's more and more plants coming into herbal medicine in the modern age from Asia, from the Americas, but there's still, to me, it matters to be using the plants of my ancestors. But then as someone who's grown up in Australia, there's an interesting dissonance or disconnect about the fact that these plants they're not belonging me to place the way that I imagine it would feel to be using more Indigenous plants.
Oh, it's once again, it's your context. Everything in creation is, everything's part of creation. There's no such thing as natural and unnatural. So, if I don't know, this breaks a lot of people's hearts when I say it, and They just think, oh, fuck that guy. But I'm going to say it anyway. Bush medicine only works in the bush. That you, if you're eating that duck and that hazelnut in the right season, then, and you're using the medicines that are available in that season to treat the ailments that happen in that season, that time, place, because you fucking live there, then it's medicinal. But, I could go down to Coles now and get a bag of hazelnuts and it wouldn't do shit for me. Even if I went and knocked a wild duck down the road, or I got I don't know, a nice roast duck from a Vietnamese shop down the road, and I ate the hazelnuts with that, it wouldn't do shit for me. You got to be in the time, place, and it's really tricky. It's really tricky. I think some things can travel in people's different pharmacopoeia, and that the things that they carry, because you can dry and make things last to another season. Well, it's not optimal though.
Yeah, and people have also
your
been
preparation of most things. It's about you might use the root in one season, the bark in another season, the leaf in another season, all for different purposes. You got all these different things that you do with all those parts. But it's not like you just Bayer back in the day when they got the willow bark and they just extracted it, and they were making their aspirins from the bark initially. But then as soon as they, got the technology together to synthesize the same compound, then off they went, and that's your aspirin now. You're living in a city where it's just everything is fucking chemicals. There's 7 million people here in Melbourne, like a third of Australia's population just stacked up on top of each other, one on top the next, bloody concrete mess on top of an old swamp. You want that aspirin. You want that lithium. You know what I mean? That you're gonna want the things that treat the ailments that come from that place. So I'm here in deep, wedged between the cheeks of civilization right here. So I'm gonna want to treat those pathologies that arise in me while I'm here, and I want to treat it. I want to go local.
That is very controversial, Tyson.
That means penicillin, baby. That means the whole lot.
The only way to treat the ills of the industrial corporate machine is to take the medicines in the industrial corporate machine.
Yeah. I don't think you can treat the diseases that are created by the civilization. You can't treat these things with plants. You can't treat these things with traditional medicine. You treat traditional illnesses with traditional medicine. But the other thing is what grows here. There's so much privet. And what can we use privet for?
I don't know what we use privet for, but I went for a walk the other day, and in three blocks, I'm just in Melbourne at the moment, and I went around within a 3-block radius of Preston here, and found about 10 medicinal plants, and I could have treated about 100 different conditions and symptoms just with those 3.
That broadleaf privet is dropping all the berries now, eh?
Yeah.
And it will for a good while now, and the birds are really into it, and it must be doing something for them. You know what I mean? And it'll be producing something for this environment that you could find as a denizen of this place.
So I'm going to disagree with you. The only way that we can treat modern ills with modern medicines, because then I think that's what the weed medicine brings us. So we have all these weeds that are thriving in this environment of urbanization and toxicity.
This is what I'm getting at with the privet.
Yeah, the privet, and the dandelion, the ribwort,
the billy goat weed earlier. It's it's a caveat. To that.
There's this plant called yellow dock. So yellow dock is a weed that grows all along the Merri Creek here. I see it all in the mud there, and it's really thriving at the moment. And the root of that plant is used generally once all of the flowers have died off. So usually we take root medicine in autumn. And the root of that plant is used often for kind of gut and skin things. But if you look more deeply into it, it's kind of like when there's toxicity in the body that the gut can't, like your bowels aren't clearing out the toxicity, and you're kind of turning into like acne or skin conditions and like funky guts, then that's what that plant is really used for. And I think it's so interesting that it grows in all of the kind of really quite toxic, damp areas. If you just think the kind of what would be in the mud of the Merri Creek, it'd be pretty rank, and that plant is there. And imagine it's doing a similar kind of job in the waterways. It's helping clear out that kind of stagnant toxicity that can't move. And
that's it.
Yes, I think as well that when we observe plants in their growing wild or even as weeds, we can learn something about how they work in the human body, right? That
they're mutating in relation to you. They're also, they want to make themselves useful to you in relation with you. Plants always want to come into relation one way or another with us, as a poison, as a medicine, as a companion, as food. One way or another, there's a symbiotic relation that develops there, and these co-evolutionary pressures are always in motion. They're always happening. So, Vietnamese mint like takes off through the waterways around the place here. Then, what does that mean here? What does that do here? Yeah.
And as you said, the chemistry of the Vietnamese mint would be really different than it would be in Vietnam, so it possibly is a completely different medicine in this location.
Yeah. But then how do you, I don't know. See, here's the thing, with your collective inquiry, how do you weed out when you're doing a collective inquiry into these weeds? How do you weed out the dickheads? How do you weed out the gammon ones and those influencers who are, basically telling you to drink your own piss or drink peroxide or something like that,
the gammon people in that group, or the gammon weeds that are like growing?
Well, the gammon people are like, I speak to the lantana. Like, so there's the gammon people who mean well, but they're just wrong. And then there's the gammon ones who are like quite not just doing misinformation but disinformation, people who are really, really peddling wrong story with a view to damaging quite a few people and having an impact on the world that way, potentially making a lot of money out of it too. How do you weed them out? How do you do these? Or you can't tell me that maybe it's women's business in your women's spaces and you want to keep that to yourself.
No, I can tell you. I think it's a really good question. And I've been working on a model just for my own work of thinking of the 3 ways of knowing. So this is just, a model that works for me, that we have the intellectual way, which, in our world is very much the scientific inquiry model. And then that we've got the embodied way. So what we feel if you take a plant, how it feels inside you, how it smells, how it tastes, and then you have the heart-based or intuitive way of knowing, which is more that subtlety that I think we're quite bad at generally in this modern age, but that some other peoples are much better at: dreams, visions, communication. And I think that there's a danger when people are only coming from that imaginal intuitive place, because that way kind of fantasy and superstition lie. So if we can really ground that imaginal knowledge find the place where it harmonizes with what we know about a plant intellectually and what is tangible and physically able to be felt, then I think we get to weed out some of those dangerous or misleading ideas. And again, if we're looking for the common threads, if 10 of us sit down and try to connect with the privet and 7 people go, oh, I think I'm getting this idea, then we can be like, well, that one's more likely to be right, or to not just be a dangerous and misleading thought. That's what I've been working with.
Nice. Well, I let me just add a bit to your, I'll just chuck a bit in for your data sets on privet. So my little fella's autistic, and so if he wants to do something, it's really hard to freaking stop him. Anyway, he's been since he was bloody 3 eating them freaking berries. Privet berries straight off the ground. He'll eat handfuls of the bastards. And anyway, he didn't die yet. So that's
I'm glad to hear that.
Bit of knowledge you can add to your thing. One little fella didn't die when he ate a lot of them berries. Yeah. See, collectively, that doesn't sound like much, but collectively, 500 different people yarning with you around that privet. And this sort of, this collective, and see, there's that next level of knowing is when you know things collectively, there's that leap that happens. It's hard to explain how the informatics are being carried, how that intelligence and that computation works. when they know it's there, they study it in beehives, in swarming behaviors in beehives. And it's like, okay, there is dark data processing going. They call it dark data processing because we're not quite sure how it's happening, but they are processing stuff there. And I guess that's how we do it. So I tell you about my little fella eating the berries and not dying. You pass on the next one. And then someone else might be thinking, well, there's a difference between the broadleaf and the small leaf, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Someone else might be making their tool handles, that privet, which is something that's quite good for. I make spears out of it.
Yeah, what do you use those spears for?
Well, actually, I used to just make things for hunting. And dancing, it was always me, instruments, tools, things like that. But for the last couple of years, everything I make is a weapon of war. So and particularly I've been making what's called bullet spears out of these ones. They're sort of sharp, vicious ones for like close quarters, thick scrub, interior spaces and stuff. So I sort of stash them strategically around my house, ready to pincushion anybody who wants to come in and mess with me. That's just, which is, really ridiculous, hyper vigilant, from my cold dead hand style of paranoia. But hey, Stephanie, privet spears don't kill people.
People kill people.
Yeah, I kill people. I kill settlers who vote no. Yeah, no.
Are there any plants? Is there any plant in particular that's been really present in your life lately that is in relationship with you in this moment?
It's that privet keeps coming through.
Yeah.
Much as I'd rather focus on the tea tree and red gum, which I've just finished the season where the sap was running. It finished a few weeks back, about a month back, more. So I finished cutting all any dishes or shields and stuff for that. From that one, and I don't know. And so I'm looking around, and there's things talking to me, but nothing as much as this privet here.
Yeah.
Which I've been in a genocidal relationship with that plant before. Been wiping it out along creeks and stuff like that.
And so growing in your garden now?
We're not allowed to remove it. Landlord won't let us. So it's like, I don't know. We try and dispose of all the berries so it can't get into the waterways and kill everything and everyone. But I guess you can only do what you can do inside this city. Speaking of, actually, I got to get going. But
all right.
Hell, that was a really good little
power interview.
Yarn. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks so much
with me. That was deadly.
Yeah, nice to talk to you, Tyson.
Yeah, you too.
All the best. That's it for this moon cycle. Thanks for joining me in another layer of this fascinating conversation we are having about the role of the sacred in our lives as herbalists. If you know someone who would love this episode, then send it through to them, as our work strengthening our herbal community through grassroots herbal education starts right here. I'll see you next time the moon is round in the sky, and until then, I wish you good health and many plants. That's it for this moon cycle. Thanks for joining me in another layer of this fascinating conversation we are having about the role of the sacred in our lives as herbalists. If you know someone who would love this episode, then send it through to them, as our work strengthening our herbal community through grassroots herbal education starts right here. I'll see you next time the moon is round in the sky, and until then, I wish you good health and many plants.